State's Attorney Fox, this next question goes to you first. Much is made about prosecutorial discretion, which you mentioned in your opening as well, and that's the power of a prosecutor to decide whether cases are charged and at what level. One way in which prosecutors in Cook County cede that authority to others has to do with the way police administer drug charges. The current practice is for police to directly charge drug crimes without prosecutorial review. My question is this good policy, and if so, why? And the follow-up to that is, will you continue this policy during the next 4 years as state's attorney?
I knew that question was coming. It's not, listen, it is the point that was just made. We recognize in our office that the majority of our cases that come, almost a half of the cases that come in our office are drug cases that we don't charge. For those of you who don't know, drug charges are directly filed by the law enforcement agencies. Other felony cases have to come through our felony review unit. What we have done, as was noted in Mr. Conway's remarks about treating drugs as a public health issue, that's what we've tried to do. Most of the drug cases that come through our office as possession cases are cases that are dismissed or deferred out at the preliminary hearing stage. When we look at the data and we compare our data to other jurisdictions, the fact is that we have more cases or drug type cases that are dismissed out at prelims than other people would normally charge, because that is not in our hands. What we have continued to struggle with is the recognition from our law enforcement partners that arresting and charging people for drug possession is not in the interest of public safety and justice. But because we are only responding to that, our response is then deferral or diversion or dismissal. The ability for us to review these cases as part of our felony review would be extensive. We have, I believe last year there were almost 19,000 drug cases that were called into Cook County, 19,000. To review 19,000 cases with our existing staff is problematic. What we would like to do is to be able to work with law enforcement to not have them bring those cases in the first place.
Thank you. Mr. Conway, same question to you.
So over time, what we have to get to is that we are giving our law enforcement partners really bright line rules under which they have to do that. But I do refer back to my previous answer in the sense that we want to be sending those cases, getting those cases into treatment as quickly as possible before they really become an issue in the criminal justice system. And the situations we really want to avoid is somebody is caught with a small amount of cocaine or heroin or something, and they then get get their bond set in bond court, and then they get a preliminary hearing date 3 weeks later, and they sit in jail for 3 weeks, and then there's a finding of no probable cause because the judge thinks, well, it's just a small amount, so then the case gets tossed. But yet in that situation, the person sat in jail for 3 weeks. They probably lost their job. They certainly had their family had to go out of their way to deal with child care and things. And those are things we just need to be much more efficient about how we deal with.
Thank you. Mr. Fioretti, same question to you.
If I have to listen to this stuff over here, I'd be,
Well,
I am totally amazed.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
I'm totally amazed by making up stories. I'm totally amazed at criticizing our judiciary and thinking that the judges are finding ways to get around sentencing.
Bob, this happens every day.
Bill,
Bob,
name one judge.
Mr. Conway, Mr. Fioretti, this is a forum. Please just direct your answer to the audience.
Drug addiction is a problem. The diversionary programs that were instituted under Judge Biebel when he was the chief judge, not only in drug court, but women's court, veterans court, mental health court, are now virtually standardized by our Supreme Court and by our legislature across the state. They did not come out of nowhere, these programs. We need to treat drug offenders first time and make sure that they get into treatment. They get the diversionary program. So we don't have them going through and sitting in jail awaiting a trial. There's a fundamental lack of understanding on what happens in these courtrooms and how they go. So I am in favor of whatever we can do about making sure that we divert all the first-time offenders. Thank you.
And we're going to talk about the public health issue and diversion programs in a moment. And we'll start with you this time, Mr. Conway. So in answer to our written questions, all of you acknowledge that people experiencing mental illness or substance abuse disorders often end up in the criminal legal system. And I think your responses to the last question reflected that fact. Of course, we suspect none of you would like to adopt a three strikes approach, but too many of our diversion programs exclude people with previous criminal histories, and many sentences for drug penalties are longer if someone does have a previous criminal conviction. How would you, Mr. Conway, direct your office to craft diversion programs and policies that address the realities of life faced by those experiencing mental illnesses or substance use disorders?
Yeah, good question. So first off, and I'll say with regard to drug crimes, you know, if we have someone that is really showing the willingness and the impetus and the family support to be willing to kick their habit, we have to support that effort. I remember actually when I was a law student, I worked at Georgetown's Criminal Justice Clinic, and I had a guy who had multiple convictions in other states for crack possession, and this was the first one he got in D.C., but the prosecutor didn't have his records from other states, so we were able to get him into a diversion program. And I didn't hold out much hope that he would be able to complete the program based on his background. But I remember his brother was there, and he said, "Look, my brother's been, has had a rough go of it, but I'm going to make sure that he's going to live with me. He's going to work at my company, my carpet installation company, and we're going to get him through the program." And sure enough, because he had that family support, he was able to get through the program, and that's the type of thing we need to be supporting people like that, even though he had obviously big background. And as far as mental health goes, the Cook County Jail is the largest mental health clinic in the state, if not the country. And the fact that they are doing the evaluations they're doing is great. And hopefully this city will reopen the mental health clinics here in Chicago, and we can work with them to make sure we're getting the right people in there.
Thank you. Mr. Fioretti.
Thank you. I do hope, and I've been an advocate for years about reopening every mental health clinic. I remember when Ram said we'll track down each and every person and where they're going, and within a few months after closing all those clinics, we lost all those people. In December, I gave a graduation speech to about 35 people who at a recovery center down here on Lake Street, about 3500 West Lake. Some of them have been in the recovery center not once, and they graduated twice, 3 times. I see the problems of what drug addiction can bring and what it means to lose people's jobs and their families. But drug addiction, homelessness, and mental health are all tied together. We can't deny that in this city on what we're doing. We have to find solutions. And how do we find that? Good paying jobs, healthy jobs, making sure people have an uplifting experience. That's why, again, we need to find a way to create jobs for everybody in this city. We can talk about the great downtown, but the wealth of downtown is not shared in our neighborhoods. And my vision is safe streets and strong communities for everybody.
Thank you. State's Attorney Fox.
Thank you. When I got into office, we looked at our diversion programs and found that we were excluding a significant number of people because they had previously gone through or failed or had a conviction. And so what we said was that we were not going to exclude people because of prior convictions or having failed a diversion. And thus, in the last 3 years, we've been able to increase our diversion participation by 25%. But I want to, again, have an honest conversation here. Drug addiction is not if your family is with you and help you through. We have many people who are disconnected from families because of their addictions, and we're not going to put them in positions where they're going to be able to have the support systems to help them, and that still doesn't mean that they don't have a public health issue. I have said and continue to say it is my office's position, and we convened a group of leaders back in October, that I would prefer not to prosecute drug crimes at all and would be willing to sacrifice that portion of my budget, that 40% that goes to the prosecution of drug crimes, because they don't belong in the justice system, period. whether it's someone's third time or 15th time. The definition of addiction is someone continuing to engage in a negative behavior despite knowing the consequences. And so we are fooling ourselves to believe that, oh, this is the rock bottom when you see a drug addict's rap sheet and this is their 19th arrest and they can't get a job and they can't get housing and all these things. As it relates to mental health, I think we have to have honest conversations about the fact that we have become the repository in the criminal justice system for failed systems outside, the closing of mental health clinics and the like. And it is not sufficient for us to continue to allow these cases in, knowing we aren't the place to deal with them, and just triage. And that's what we've been doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.